This is Legal Ed 6. Get ready to immerse yourself in real-world law enforcement challenges and evidence-based solutions. You belong here, the command center where instructors and supervisors turn the page to expert insights that drive trust and performance in the organizational culture.
The next voice you will hear is fearless and focused, holding you up to your greatness, not your limitations. The mindset shift begins right now.
Welcome to the final episode of the Command Center of Legal Ed 6. I am your host, Charles Rambo. Tonight, we're closing the curtain on this exclusive training series, Curriculum and Organizational Policing Strategies, the You Get What You Tolerate series. And in this final episode 6, we're getting down to business on Instructional Systems Design. This isn't about PowerPoints or the latest gadgets. It's about your lesson plan and how it could become Exhibit A in a federal lawsuit. We begin by keeping it real compared to what? You've got the certificate, you're a post-certified instructor or field training officer. You've got the war stories, the charisma that can hold up to the next extended break or long lunch hour. But if you were sitting across from a plaintiff's attorney in a deposition, how would what you kept real in the classroom compare to the content of your lesson plan? Would your structure be able to hold up inside of a courtroom? Let's examine this realness under the critical question of the case of Kibb versus City of Springfield, where a man died after officers improperly detained him. The court didn't just see it as a mistake, they saw systematic failures, a constitutional deprivation because of one thing: inadequate training. Now let's look at it from Monell versus Department of Social Services. That will sink into your government's deep pocket or might even come into your 401k for awarding damages when it's cited that local governments are persons under USC 1983 that can be sued for constitutional violations, only when the violation was caused by an official policy, custom, or practice of the government entity. So you say, well, Rambo, what does that have to do with me? Spoiler alert, and clutch your instructor certification. You're going to be the first one on the witness stand with the training file. That outdated PowerPoint that you call a lesson plan that you actually borrowed from another instructor. What about that test that you let everyone pass and the certificate that you signed? It has no more value than wall decoration, with no skills, real-world applications to what must be done. That's not just laziness. That's how keeping it real compared to what you failed in providing adequate training. And last, but perhaps the most critical to law enforcement training, I want you to think about it this way. In a highly litigious society that rejects any type of immunity, at least you have the objective, reasonable officer standard in Graham versus Carter. Our landmark decision, the court, public, and internal affairs investigators can keep it real compared to what and how your officers act reasonably, even in the most critical calls for service. Think about it this way. What they did in a split-second decision will be a direct reflection of their standards of training for what and how you taught in the classroom.
Viral video out there showing a Georgia State trooper kicking a man multiple times on the ground in Atlanta, and it has some folks asking if the use of force was actually necessary. The video starts right after Georgia State Patrol trying to pull the man over for not wearing a seatbelt, where GSP says the man drove off and got out of the car and took off running. And that's where the video picks up. A former law enforcement officer tells our Hope 4, the video was really concerning until the rest of the facts came to light.
Let's look at this video from Edgewood Avenue. Right there, you see a Georgia State trooper chasing a man. Those two pops, the trooper's taser. And when the man falls, you see those two kicks. Let's look at it from another angle. Right there, two kicks before the officer pulls the man from under the car.
At first it concerned me.
This is Charles Rambo, a former Fulton County deputy and current law enforcement trainer. He also sat on use of force boards in Fulton County.
The trooper was striking his heel like out of excitement or out of something that he saw suspect.
GSP says the trooper did see something suspect, a gun. They say right here is when a gun fell from the man's waistband. But at the time, the trooper didn't see where it went, and the man refused to show his hands once he fell.
The trooper acted in good faith and was not malicious in what he was doing if he truly legitimately saw a firearm, of which they did say was recovered and there was also potentially stolen.
GSP's use of force policy states a trooper can use non-lethal force reasonably to overcome resistance, control a subject, or protect themselves or others from injury. The trooper eventually found the gun on the sidewalk. You see it right there in his hand. GSP says they will review the use of force. Rambo believes the trooper acted with restraint by using his taser and foot strikes to get the man in handcuffs.
I would have hated to have seen that officer, that trooper, having to use his service weapon. In my humble estimation, he did act with reasonableness.
The Georgia State Patrol says the 27-year-old man is on probation for assault and has an active warrant for simple battery. He was charged with fleeing, obstruction, possession of a firearm with an altered serial number, and 6 other crimes.
Here's the breakthrough for law enforcement instructors and trainers: neuroscience. No, you don't need a PhD, but when you understand how stress, memory, and motivation interact, you're not just a trainer anymore. You are now the thought leader, teacher, and guide in minimizing civil liability in your agency. Let's break it down. Dominance motivation. Law enforcement attracts power-seeking personalities. That drive must be trained before it becomes a lawsuit waiting to happen for negligence of retention. Neuroplasticity, where training doesn't just inform, it transforms the brain and rewires based upon repetition and stress. Cognitive load theory, where working memory is limited. Therefore, dumping dumbed-down information is not training. It causes confusion. And last, but most important to law enforcement and neuroscience introduction into training, neural nodes. That's what we are building. Tactical knowledge clusters that activate under pressure. These were not theories put together in a science project on the brain. It was actual applications that I discovered through a group called the Transformational Leadership Collaborative that verified that unknowingly this is what I was doing in rewiring brain to actual performance in law enforcement duties. And I plan to introduce this group at a later time and date to allow them to give you more professional insights. In the meantime, here's what an elected non-law enforcement official had to say in a very rare and separate comment that we shared in a news story about 21st century training.
Tonight, in light of the police beating in Memphis, impending changes now for a crime-fighting police squad in Metro Atlanta. The Fulton County Sheriff's Office now reevaluating its own Scorpion unit. It comes after the beating death of 29-year-old Tyree Nichols in Tennessee. The officers involved were members of a similarly named Scorpion squad operated by Memphis police. Adam Murphy, live at the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. And Adam, the sheriff says this is about more than just the name.
Well, hello there. Good evening. Yes, Sheriff Labatt said in light of the heinous actions of these officers in Memphis, he now said it's time to begin to look internally to make sure something like this never happens here.
The release of body cam footage showing Memphis police officers beating Tyree Nichols has prompted at least one Metro Atlanta law enforcement agency to reevaluate its own crime-fighting unit. Just like Memphis police, the Fulton County Sheriff's Office has called their special task force the Scorpion Unit. Now, Sheriff Patrick Labatt is considering a name change and a thorough review of the unit.
Proper training is the key.
Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts said he's not convinced these changes will make a difference.
And I know that there's an effort to change the name, but from my perspective, a rose is a rose no matter what you call it. So unless there's a change in training, and by training I mean not only the physical training, but the psychological training and the new policing tactics, whatever that means, everything, all of the results will be the same.
On the other hand, retired Lieutenant Charles Rambo believes crime-fighting units are vital to keeping communities safe.
We must get back to the facts of constitutionally based policing practices. And that's what I trained was in the Fourth Amendment, because everything that we do incident to a search, seizure, or arrest must be backed up by reasonable expectations to privacy.
He worked for the Fulton County Sheriff's Office for 28 years and even trained members of their Scorpion unit. He says it's about leadership and cultivating a proper culture.
Units have to be supervised by those supervisors and managers that are not afraid of culture. They must be able to stand up and step up and say that when something is constitutionally not in place, this is not going to be tolerated, because now you're going to discredit the unit.
Because federal and state constitutions is the basis of our profession, imagine when real neuroscience implementation comes into lesson plan strategy. ADDIE for law enforcement trainers isn't just instructional design, it's a courtroom defensible plan in how you, number one, analysis of the gap. What's the missing skill? What real-world failures are you trying to prevent? Incident reports, internal affairs cases, and body cam footage are great sources for review. Number two, design for the brain. Use repetition, relevance, and realism. Build the course like you're on a mission for raising the level of competence at every level of the agency. Number three, develop retention tools, scenario-based training, stress drills, decision trees. If it doesn't transfer knowledge to performance in the real world, it doesn't belong in your lesson plan. Number four, implement with authority. To be discussed later under expert authority and Socratic lecture. Deliver with clarity, presence, and command, where every word that you say has impact on the student's mindset. And number five, accept evaluation with some tough skin. It's not about you, it's about the rate of retention that students feel the course either hit or missed the mark. Make adjustments, because most critical, take it or let it alone. Evaluations are at the top of documents to be subpoenaed in a civil trial. Everything that we have covered thus far under Instructional Systems Design, from legal analysis to ADDIE, now comes the revolutionary breakthrough of artificial intelligence. Like it or not, AI is here, and it can go a very long way in helping you to write lesson plans, research trends, and analyze data. But let's be honest, AI does not have expert human intuition or command presence needed in the classroom. It can't model the sequential authority, that quiet credibility that you have forged over the years through leading, yes, even failing, and adapting to what needs to be done. The future of law enforcement training, therefore, isn't replacing you. It is, however, demanding more from your capacity as a leader, teacher, and guide. So please use AI as a tool and not a crutch. As we're now moving towards the end of this podcast, here's a word on sequential authority. If your classroom is too comfortable, it's not engaging, and I say this with no apology. The days of teaching grown-ass professionals who have the power of life and death in a split-second decision from a 10th grade comprehension level must end now. If your lesson plans read like a high school worksheet, don't be surprised at the juvenile-like behaviors and performance at every level of the agency. Remember, the lesson plan is a reflection of the person who wrote it. And I bear witness to this truth through my own Socratic standards of teaching, that regardless of the educational level of the learner, from GED to PhD, you too must ignite the fire of competencies through Socratic lecture. Through robust yet engaging classroom management, you're not just sliding through PowerPoints and entertaining intentional and irrelevant conversations designed to hijack your class from the flow of learning. No, ma'am, no, sir, you take back your classroom as the captain that says that I am the captain of this ship, provoking critical thought leadership. And while this may be a threat to those in power, whose careers thrive on keeping people ignorant, today you're going to learn we are pressing the mark towards excellence in our classroom, an inspiration to the workforce to think, not just comply, with what is inconsistent of the case of Monell against training, policy, and supervision. Take it or let it alone. The instructor is the most important of your agency. Why? Because it is through their classrooms that all disciplines of the profession are taught. Recruits who now will rise from sergeant, lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel, chief, or sheriff will pass through that classroom applying what you taught them to use in their current capacities. Through Socratic-based lecture, you're not only building your challenging expert intuition among a new generation of leaders, standing in the fire of the decisions of what must be done with competent character and constitutional clarity.
Nationwide debate on police training with respect to tasers, including the physical location of where the weapon is strapped on an officer's waist. Fox 5's Morse Diggs is live in Northeast Atlanta tonight. Morse, will agencies be studying what happened in Minneapolis?
Well, undoubtedly, Ms. Potter is going to get some more unwelcome attention throughout Georgia law enforcement and probably around the country. They'll use that accident as a teaching moment. Now, the first thing you're going to see in my package is an Atlanta police officer getting prepared for work, getting prepared for roll call, and he'll put on a duty belt. That position of that belt is very important. That is a duty belt the Atlanta officer straps on before going into his precinct for a roll call. Each will undergo an inspection to ensure the equipment, including the weapons, are where they're supposed to be on that belt. Equipment deployed correctly is front and center in a trial that's received national headlines. A Minneapolis police officer had her gun in hand and used it when she thought she'd fired her taser.
That red dot pointing down should be enough to make the subject say, no, I don't want to take on that particular officer. If we have to swing around and now deploy that taser, we're screaming, taser, taser!
That warning is customary.
That warning is very customary.
I asked a retired sheriff supervisor and trainer of Fulton deputies to explain what safeguards are in place to keep an accidental draw from occurring. Departments instruct their personnel to position the gun by the dominant hand, usually on the right, and the taser on the opposite side. Plus, the weapons look different. The taser will have different color markings.
The taser was to be placed on the opposite side so that you would have a cross draw and not mistaken pulling your weapon when you are actually trying to use less than lethal force.
Their eyes are going to be trained on the situation, correct?
Absolutely. Even in the most stressful situation, when you're going up against something high risk, you can differentiate between the two based upon how you have been trained muscle memory of which one to draw.
An interesting footnote to the taser policy here at APD, and probably followed by some of the other departments as well. When a recruit is coming on at the academy, they want the recruit to fully understand the power of a taser. Each of them is shot with a taser. As far as the veteran officers who undergo training at least once a year, it's optional to them. They've been grandfathered in, but they could also choose to feel the effects of the taser. Live from Buckhead, I'm Morris Diggs, Fox 5 News.
All right, Morris, we'll be talking about this more on Shorten.
So in closing, colleagues, if you think that training is about a oversaturated PowerPoint and a long lunch break just to coast to get to the end of the day and the award of a generic certificate, you are putting your agency in the line of liability, especially when Lady Liberty peeks from behind that blindfold and points you with the sword of 50% plus one preponderance of the evidence that you are culpable for failure to train. You Get What You Tolerate has been a direct challenge to align your curriculum to organizational policing evidence-based practices, that wherever your leadership is present in the classroom, everything in the organization begins to change. It only takes one person right now to get that process started. Download Module 6, Instructional Systems Design Manual, free for a limited time. And while our introductory episodes have come to an end, we're still enrolling in the accredited courses available one-on-one or in cohorts up to 40 hours of Georgia Post Certified training or as reciprocated by your state's Post Council. Finally, if you would like subject matter expertise on this series, you can book me at criminaljusticelearning.online to present at your agency, your academy, or podcast. You can also follow me on social media at LegalEd6. Fearless and focused on evidence-based results, I am Charles Rambo, and I thank you for listening to this series.